In this week's action-packed and shocking episode of Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, Tekkadan has a bloody beach battle with Gallarhorn, and they must contend with Karta Issue and her band of Mobile Suit Knights. Before going any further into my review, let me just give a spoiler warning. There is a major character death in this episode, so if you haven't watched this week's episode, I would highly recommend going and watching that right now before you watch any more of this review. Let's just get right to the point. This week's episode was an action-packed guerrilla warfare episode of Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, which brought to mind memories of Mobile Suit Gundam the 8th MS Team. Not only that, but this week's episode just had a lot of badass anime flair to the action scenes, and we also got a very important character death, which was definitely flagged multiple times in this episode. If it wasn't for the fact that this character has been built up for the last couple of episodes to be killed, it would make it a little more shocking, but when it does happen, it's still a pretty intense moment. So let's just get the elephant out of the room. Biscuit gets killed in this week's episode, and if you're curious as to whether we're not actually sure if he's dead or not, just look at the preview for the next episode. There is definitely going to be a body bag. All of the evidence was there for Biscuit's death in this week's episode. All of the scenes with his sisters of Cookie and Cracker, the scene where he's confronted by Orga and they decide that they're going to talk to each other about the important things of what they should do with Tekkadan after this big upcoming battle, and of course that final scene where Maribit is actually talking to Orga and saying, "Don't worry, you'll be able to talk to him after this battle." He is definitely going to get killed after this, and that's what happened. But there was a lot of build-up to that, and a lot of great mobile suit action in this episode. We even got to see some things we haven't seen from the series thus far, which is Karta Issue and her group of knights, who make this amazingly great flashy entrance. They go into formation, they do all these poses, and honestly for me, aside from that final scene with Mika at the end, Akihiro was like the real star of this week's episode. The character is so freaking badass in so many different ways. When Karta Issue and her group actually arrived and went into formation and did their big knight pose with their swords, he from afar just decides to blast one of them directly in the head, just taking them out in one shot. It was really damned awesome. Not only that, but we got to see some new abilities from both the Gundam Barbados and of course the Gujin Rebake. The Gujin Rebake is the one that surprised me the most this episode, because he's able to fight people by grabbing onto them, and even if his other arms are destroyed, those weird big things on his back can actually reveal another set of arms, which can pick up another weapon, allowing him to just completely annihilate. That scene was freaking great. Not to mention the Gundam Barbados actually has a brand new weapon, which is this giant blunt weapon, which is also a giant pair of clamps, which you can use to grab onto other mobile suits' arms or legs or even their head, so that you can just completely destroy them. And at the end of the episode, when Orga and Biscuit get involved in one of those smaller mechs, Karta Issue sees this and decides to run after him to attack, and Biscuit decides to just throw Orga overboard, and he ends up taking the attack and gets crushed by this giant mech. Mikazuki just gets all sorts of pissed off and decides to start attacking, and appropriately, that's pretty much where the episode ends right there, with Orga accepting the death of Biscuit, who has his final words, set to the original ending theme, Orphans Namida, which is so great to finally have back, because in my humble opinion, at least, I think it's a much better ending than the second one that's delivered in the series, and I also think the original intro is also better. So it was really great to finally get to see that return. I imagine we're probably going to get back to the second ending next time. They probably just did that because we had a major character death, probably the first real major character death from Tekkadan in the series. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans? Just an action-packed, drama-filled episode, which had a lot of really great, surprising action in it, which was all competently animated. We got to see everybody getting involved in the battle. Naze Turbines girls, Akihiro, Shino was also being really awesome in this episode, setting up landmines for all the other enemy mobile suits to run onto. When Karta finally got to the battlefield, though, that's when things started to get really intense. I love the look of her mobile suits, still very similar to the Grays poses and other Galahorn mobile suits we've seen from the series, but they have these big, realistic-looking medieval swords, which I think are really great. Carter herself is just a really fun villain, just incredibly over-the-top with a great design. I honestly thought she was going to be killed in this episode, especially with Mika just going completely insane at the very end when he saw Orga and Biscuit being attacked. Such an intense final scene at the very end with Orga screaming. Just something that I'm always going to remember from the series. And when Orphans no Namida started playing, it was so perfect for the ending of this week's episode. Obviously, on the technical side of things, this week's episode looked pretty good. There were some great action scenes, both mobile suit and non-mobile suit action. All the characters got to do some pretty cool stuff, and this is an episode that's always going to be remembered for the death of Biscuit. So this was a fantastic episode of Iron-Blooded Orphans. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. Definitely check it out, Gundam fans. If you've watched the other Gundam anime series, or you've been following Iron-Blooded Orphans, this is a must-watch episode. But if you did watch this week's episode of Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching this review. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!